I did not go to my only daughter's wedding. I want to begin there, with the plain fact of it, no softening, because for 8 years I dressed that fact up in so many fine words, standards, principles, what was best for her, that I nearly lost the ability to see it for what it actually was. So, let me say it cleanly, the way it deserves to be said. My daughter got married, and I, her mother, sat in my beautiful house in a pressed dress with somewhere I had decided not to be, and I let her chair for me stand empty in that church, and I did not speak to her again for 8 years. That is what I did. Everything else in this story is just the long, expensive education in what that cost. My name is Patricia. I am 65 years old, a retired interior designer in Charlottesville, Virginia, and I have spent my whole life making things look correct. That was my profession, and it was also, I see now, my religion. The rightness of things, the way a room should be, the way a life should be arranged, the way people of a certain kind do and do not behave. I was very good at it. My homes were photographed, my taste was impeccable, and I raised my daughter Rachel inside that taste, with every advantage and every expectation, and I taught her, without ever saying it in so many words, that there was a right sort of life to want and a right sort of person to want it with. I should tell you where that came from, the rightness, because I have had 2 years alone to trace it back, and I owe it that much honesty. I was not born to the life I built. I clawed my way into it. My own mother took in sewing and my father drank, and I grew up in a small, mean house being ashamed of it, and I decided very young that I would climb out and never go back. And I did. I married well. I learned which fork and which fabric and which neighborhoods. I made myself into a woman no one would ever guess had come from where I came from. And the cruelty I later aimed at Tony, I understand now, was really aimed backward, at the girl in the mean little house I had spent my whole life outrunning. He reminded me of where I came from, and I could not forgive him for it, and I called that protecting my daughter when it was really just protecting the lie I had made of myself. The snob is so often just a frightened person who escaped something and cannot bear to see it walk back through the door. That was me. I dressed my fear up in pearls and called it taste. And then Rachel, at 26, fell in love with Tony. Tony was an electrician. He came from a large, loud, working-class family on the other side of town. His father had run a small repair business. His mother had cleaned houses, possibly even houses like mine, and Tony himself was a kind, steady, good-humored young man with calloused hands and an easy laugh and absolutely none of the polish I had spent 26 years teaching my daughter to require. And I looked at him, the first time Rachel brought him to dinner, and I made a decision about him in roughly 4 seconds. And that decision was, no, not for my daughter, not for this family. She was throwing herself away. She could do so much better. He was beneath her, beneath us, and it was my job as her mother to stop her from making the great mistake of her life. I did not say it kindly, and I did not say it once. Over the months of their courtship, I said it constantly, in 100 ways, some sharp and some sweetly poisonous, the way a certain kind of mother knows how to do. I told her she was being naive. I asked, in front of him, pointed little questions about his prospects. I made it clear, in the way you can make a thing perfectly clear without ever quite stating it, that this relationship had my disapproval stamped on every inch of it. And when she told me, with her chin up in a way I had taught her myself, that they were engaged, that they were getting married with or without my blessing, I said the words I have had 8 years to regret and will regret for whatever years I have left. I told her that if she married that man, she should not expect me at the wedding, and frankly, should not expect much of anything from me afterward. I gave my own daughter a choice between the man she loved and her mother. And then I was shocked, genuinely, indignantly shocked, when she chose him. I have made myself remember the specific things I did, because forgetting them would be one more comfort I have not earned. I corrected Tony's grammar at my own dinner table, gently, in front of everyone, and watched my daughter's face go tight. I asked him what his 5-year plan was in a tone I would not have used on a job applicant. I told Rachel, privately, that she was settling, that she had a fine degree and was going to throw it away to be an electrician's wife, that she would be bored of him in a decade and trapped. I weaponized every advantage I had ever given her, turned her whole expensive upbringing into a list of reasons this good man was not enough. And the terrible thing is that none of it was loud. I never screamed. It was all delivered in my smooth, reasonable, well-bred voice, which is so much worse, because a scream you can dismiss, and a cold, reasonable cruelty gets inside you and makes you doubt yourself. Did that to my own child, in the name of loving her, for the better part of a year, and then I acted betrayed when she finally chose the person who was kind to her over the mother who was not. She married Tony on a Saturday in October. I know the date because I sat in my house that whole day, rigid with a righteousness I mistook for strength, and I did not go. There was a chair for me. Rachel told me years later that they kept a chair for me right up until the ceremony started, in case I came to my senses. I did not come to my senses. The chair stayed empty, and that empty chair, I have come to understand, is the truest portrait of me that has ever been made. Finer than anything I ever decorated, more honest than anything I ever designed. A beautiful, correct, empty chair where a mother should have been. After that, the silence. It started as my doing. I was punishing her, withholding myself, certain she would eventually come crawling back to apologize and admit I had been right. But she didn't crawl back, because she had nothing to apologize for, and slowly the silence stopped being a punishment I was administering and became simply the shape of my life. The years went by. I heard things, occasionally, through the thin grapevine of a small city, that they had bought a little house, that Tony's business was doing well, that Rachel seemed happy. I filed each report away with a cold little sniff and told myself it wouldn't last. I had become, though I could not have admitted it then, a woman rooting against her own child's happiness because her happiness would mean I had been wrong, and being wrong was the one thing I could not afford. You would think in 8 years there would have been 100 moments to stop it. There were. There were Christmases when I could have sent a card. There was the year I heard, secondhand, that she had been in the hospital with something frightening, and a normal mother would have run to her, and I sat in my house and told myself she had made her bed. There was a mutual acquaintance who tried once to broker a thaw, and I was so coldly dismissive that she never raised it again. Each of those moments, I chose the silence, and each time it got easier to choose, because the wall was a little higher and the climb back over it a little more humiliating to contemplate. That is the thing no one tells you about estrangement when you are the one administering it. It is not one decision. It is the same decision, made again every single day, and the longer you make it, the more it feels like simply the weather, rather than a choice you are actively, daily renewing. 8 years of silence is just one cold decision, made nearly 3,000 times. My husband Gerald grieved it differently than I did. He went along with me. He was a quiet man, and I was the engine of our household, and to my shame, he let me steer us both away from our daughter rather than fight me. But it ate at him in a way it did not, then, eat at me. He kept her photograph on his dresser. He would say, sometimes, carefully, "Pat, don't you think it's been long enough?" And I would shut him down, and he would retreat. And when he got sick 2 years ago and was dying, he took my hand near the end and asked me one thing. He asked me to fix it, to call Rachel, to not let our family end like this. He used nearly his last clear words on it, and I told him I would, to give him peace, and then I buried him, and I did not call her, because even my husband's dying wish was not enough to bend my pride. I let his last request go unhonored rather than admit, even then, that I had been wrong. I want you to understand the size of the thing I am telling you. That is who I had become. And then it was just me, alone, in the big, correct, beautiful house for 2 years. And let me tell you what pride is worth in the end, when everyone is gone and the house is quiet and there is no one left to be right in front of. It is worth nothing. It is worth less than nothing, because it has cost you everything and given you only the cold company of itself. I sat in my lovely rooms in the evenings, and the silence had a texture to it, a weight, and I began, slowly, against my will, the way a frozen thing thaws from the outside in, to understand what I had done. Not all at once, but the certainty that had kept me warm for years started, in that empty house, to feel less like principle and more like what it was. I just did not yet have the courage to call it by its name, or to do anything about it. The house did the work my conscience would not. Grief has a way of stripping the furniture off your certainties, and after Gerald was gone, there was nothing left to perform for. No audience, no household to steer, no one across the dinner table to be right in front of. Just me and the rooms I had made so beautiful and so empty. I would set one place at that long table and eat in a silence that had a sound to it. And I started, in those evenings, to do a thing I had never let myself do. I let myself miss her. Not the principle, not the argument, her. The weight of her as a baby. The way she used to read in the window seat. The chin she put up at me, my own chin, when she told me she would marry him anyway. I had been so busy being her judge for 8 years that I had forgotten I was her mother, and in that empty house, with no one left to impress, the mother started, very quietly, to come back. But a coward can miss someone for a long time and still not pick up the phone, and that is exactly what I did, for 2 more years, until a child finally made it impossible. And then, on an ordinary Tuesday this past spring, I went out to my mailbox, and among the catalogs and the bills, there was a large, slightly bent envelope addressed to me in handwriting I did not recognize, a careful adult hand. And inside it, with no letter, was a child's drawing. It was done in crayon, the way small children draw, a wobbly house, a yellow sun with rays like spider legs, a tree, and 3 figures holding hands, a tall one and a medium one and a small one, and then, set off to the side, a 4th figure, a figure with gray hair, drawn in careful gray scribble and a triangle dress, standing a little apart from the others. And beneath that 4th figure, in the painstaking, backwards-lettered hand of a child just learning to write, it said, Grandma. And on the back, in that same small hand, helped along by an adult's, it said, To Grandma, I love you even though I haven't met you yet. From Lily. I have a granddaughter. Her name is Lily. She is, I worked out, about 6 years old, which means she was born 2 years into my silence and has lived her entire small life with a grandmother who chose not to know her. And somewhere, somehow, my daughter whom I abandoned, whom I gave an empty chair, whom I refused even as my husband died, had told her little girl about me, had kept me alive, as some kind of person worth drawing, in the imagination of a child I had done nothing to deserve. And that child had drawn me into her family picture, standing a little apart, the way you draw someone you have been told about but have never met, and had signed it, I love you even though I haven't met you yet. I sat down at my elegant table with that crayon drawing in my hands, and the woman who had not cried at her own husband's funeral came completely apart. Because here is what that drawing did. For 8 years, I had managed to keep the estrangement abstract, a matter of principle, of rightness, of who had wronged whom. I had never once had to look at the actual human cost, because I had arranged my life precisely so that I would not have to. And then, a 6-year-old reached across all of it with a box of crayons and made it unbearably specific. There was a whole person now. There was a little girl with my daughter's chin, probably, and that man's easy laugh, living 20 minutes away, who had been told she had a grandmother and who had drawn that grandmother into her family with love, and without the slightest idea that the grandmother was the reason there was a hole in the picture in the first place. My pride could argue with Rachel. My pride could argue with Tony, with Gerald, even with my own conscience. My pride had absolutely nothing to say to a crayon drawing that said, I love you, even though I haven't met you yet. It just died, right there at the table, finally, 8 years too late. I kept the drawing on the table for 2 days before I could even decide what to do, and I looked at it 100 times. That little gray figure standing apart from the family with Grandma written under her in backwards letters. I kept thinking about the conversations that drawing implied, that somewhere, in a little house 20 minutes away, my daughter had chosen, despite everything, to tell her child that she had another grandmother. Had not erased me, had not made me the villain I had so richly earned the right to be called, had left a door cracked open in the imagination of a 6-year-old, just in case. That generosity, from the daughter I had abandoned, undid me more than any anger ever could have. She had every right to raise that child as though I did not exist, and instead, she had kept a small gray space for me in the family picture and let her little girl reach into it. The very least I could do, finally, was try to become worth the space she had saved. I am not going to pretend the rest was easy or quick, because it was not, and a story where I drove over and was forgiven in an afternoon would be exactly the kind of pretty, false, correct thing I built my whole life out of, and I am done with those. What I did was write Rachel a letter. A real one. I did not defend myself. I did not explain my reasons, because my reasons were the problem. I wrote, simply, that I had been wrong. Not mistaken, not hasty, but wrong, in the deep way. Wrong about Tony and wrong about what matters, and wrong about the kind of mother and the kind of person I had chosen to be. I told her I had no right to ask for anything. I told her I had gotten her father's last wish wrong, along with everything else. And I told her that her daughter's drawing was on my refrigerator, the first thing of beauty that had been in my house in years, and that if she ever, on her own terms and her own timeline, wanted to let me try to earn a place in that family picture, I would spend whatever I have left doing it. She did not call for 3 weeks. I deserved every day of those 3 weeks, and when she did call, her voice was careful and guarded, and not at all the voice of a daughter falling into her mother's arms. It was the voice of a grown woman, a mother herself now, who had been deeply hurt and was not going to pretend otherwise to make me comfortable. She said we could start slowly. She said Tony was a better man than I would ever know, and that I would be meeting him as exactly that, with no more of my judgments, or not at all. She said Lily had asked to send the drawing herself, had insisted on it, and that she, Rachel, had nearly not let her, and had decided in the end to let the child be braver than the adults. We are at the beginning now. I have met Lily twice. I have shaken the hand of the son-in-law I spent 8 years insulting, a kind man who had every reason to shut his door in my face and did not, who said only, "We're glad you're here now," with a grace I did not earn and am trying to learn from. It is small, and it is fragile, and it is the most important thing in my life, and I will never again mistake being right for being loved. If you are estranged from someone you love over a position you are certain is correct, if there is an empty chair somewhere with your name on it that your pride has kept you out of, then this story is for you. One word in the comments, if it found you. Chair. Just that. It is for every empty seat we leave out of certainty, and for the table that, sometimes, by a mercy we do not deserve, is still willing to set a place for us if we are finally humble enough to come. Subscribe for new stories, real patterns, full narratives, the long game. 2 small pieces of wisdom from this one before I go. The first, be very, very careful with the word principle because pride loves to wear it. I told myself for 8 years that I was standing on principle, that I had standards, that I was protecting my daughter, and every bit of it was a costume that my pride and my snobbery put on so that I would not have to see them in the mirror. There is a test, and I wish I had known it sooner. A true principle is willing to pay its own costs, but pride always sends the bill to someone else. My so-called principle cost my daughter her mother, cost a little girl her grandmother, cost my dying husband his last wish. It cost everyone but me the comfort of my being right. If the position you are holding so firmly is mostly expensive for the people you claim to love, and mostly comfortable for you, look again. It may not be a principle at all. It may just be your pride, beautifully dressed. The second, you can be right, or you can have your people, and there will come a day when you cannot have both. I do not mean you should never hold a conviction. I mean that almost nothing you are certain about is worth more than the actual living person on the other side of your certainty, and that the years you spend waiting for them to admit you were right are years you are simply choosing not to have them. I waited 8 years for an apology I was owed nothing of, and I got back a fraction of what I threw away, and only because a 6-year-old was braver with a crayon than I had been with a whole lifetime. Do not wait for the mercy of a child's drawing. If there is someone you have cut off because you are sure you are right, ask yourself whether you would rather be right at their funeral or wrong at their kitchen table. Then go set down your pride and go to the table, while there is still a table to go to. Pride feels like principle right up until it leaves you alone in a house full of empty chairs. So, if you are estranged over your own certainty, be the first to lay it down. You can be right, or you can have them, but you will not get to keep both forever. I'll see you next time.